It began not with a swipe or a setup, but with a glitch, a misfired lock system at a private art gala left John, a reserve gallery technician, and Lydia, a vivacious events coordinator in stilettos and sarcasm, trapped overnight amidst draped sculptures and priceless canvases. The room, dimly lit by emergency strips, hummed with static tension. Lydia cracked open a bottle of Veuve Cliquot meant for VIPs, declaring it emergency morale support, and offered John a toast to absurdity. They sprawled on a velvet bench, trading barbed wit and secret confessions. His obsession with Dutch masters, her aversion to houseplants, the lovers who wrecked them. Hours passed in a haze of laughter and growing heat. When Lydia leaned in to examine a smudge on his cheek, their lips collided like striking flint. What followed was reckless, breathless, intoxicating. Amid shadows and silence, they undressed in whispers and gasps, her nails against marble, his hands in silk. When a maintenance crew finally opened the door at sunrise, they emerged tousled and elated, like two people reborn in a moment of chaos. Later, she would call it kismet. John would remember the way her laugh echoed against stone. Neither realized they'd just lit the match to a beautiful, slow-burning catastrophe. Marriage for John and Lydia had always been a kind of dance, fluid, fiery, a little dangerous. In the early years, it was all late-night takeout in bed, kisses stolen in elevators, and hotel key cards tucked into jacket pockets like secrets. Their chemistry burned hot and fast, like brush fire in a drought. But over time, that blaze dimmed into something more volatile. Lydia, ever the enigma, was a force of charisma and contradictions. She'd text John sultry photos from airport lounges, only to come home and retreat into her phone. One week, she'd beg for tangled mornings and candlelit dinners. The next, she'd vanish into business trips and arrive back colder than the city she left behind. John, loyal and quietly yearning, tried to anchor their life. Folded laundry, dinners on the stove, a worn novel left open on her side of the bed. Their sex life, once spontaneous and electric, had turned into a performance Lydia directed. Passion was still there, but now it felt curated, strategic moans, perfect lighting, the scent of unfamiliar perfume. He convinced himself she was just tired, overworked, stressed. But the way her eyes sometimes lingered too long on her phone, how she showered immediately after coming home late, it planted the kind of questions that keep a man awake at 3 a.m. She still touched him, kissed him, but something essential was missing: sincerity. As much as they shared a bed, John had begun to feel like a ghost sleeping beside a stranger who used to laugh in his arms. 3 weeks before John's birthday, Lydia delivered the news with a perfectly apologetic pout and a silk robe that barely stayed on her shoulders. Her company, she claimed, was hosting a mandatory luxury brand retreat in Napa Valley, networking with champagne, she joked, fingers tracing lazy circles on his chest. "I fought it, I swear," she murmured, before kissing him like an apology, like a soft distraction. That night, she seduced him with a kind of hunger that felt almost desperate. She straddled him with slow confidence, whispered promises against his neck. "We'll celebrate properly when I'm back, maybe somewhere with a view." By morning, she was slipping into stilettos and zipping her suitcase. No laptop, no charger, no work binder, but 2 new bikinis and perfume John had never smelled before. He didn't question it, not out loud. He kissed her goodbye, wished her well, and ignored the weight in his gut. His birthday arrived quiet and hollow. No calls from Lydia, just a single text mid-afternoon. "Wish you were here. This place is insane." No photos, no voice. John spent the evening on his worn couch, a whiskey glass sweating in his hand, watching candles flicker over the untouched cake he'd bought himself. He tried not to resent her absence, tried to believe the retreat was real. But when he saw her heels still dusted with sand instead of vineyard dirt days later, something small and sharp began to twist beneath the surface of his skin. Something he couldn't quite ignore anymore. It started as a harmless ping, an Instagram story forwarded by Eli, a casual friend of John's, with the caption, "Isn't this your brother?" John opened it expecting a laugh, maybe a party clip. Instead, it gutted him. A 10-second video from a rooftop infinity pool, all golden light and soft background music, showing Felix shirtless, lounging with a drink in one hand and Lydia, his wife, in the other. She was draped across him, laughing with her head tilted back, wearing the cherry red bikini John helped pack just days earlier. Felix's hand slid across her waist like it belonged there. Her fingers toyed with the gold chain around his neck. They looked like lovers, like the world didn't exist beyond their touch. John watched the video again and again. Each loop was a deeper knife. He paused it, rewound, zoomed in. Lydia's wrist wore the bracelet John gave her last anniversary. Felix had on the sunglasses John left in his glove box. He didn't notice the camera. They weren't hiding. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the ease of it, the intimacy, the way Lydia melted into Felix like it was natural. Like John had been replaced without a second thought. His heart didn't shatter. It tightened, hardened. The bile rose before the anger. He set down his phone, suddenly cold all over, his mind racing. Not with grief, but with clarity. Whatever they were doing, they didn't expect to get caught. And that made John's next move very, very important. John had never considered himself a suspicious type, but now he moved with surgical precision. His hands trembled only once when he opened the banking app. A $1,250 withdrawal, logged the morning Lydia left. The exact amount his grandmother had gifted him for his birthday. 8 crisp hundreds tucked into his wallet, now gone. An account she swore she rarely used. Nothing unusual. Clean as bleach. But John knew Lydia, and Lydia didn't do clean. Next, he called the resort, playing the part of a forgetful husband needing a receipt for expense reporting. The woman on the phone, cheerful and oblivious, happily confirmed a romantic couples package for Lydia Clark. Ocean View Suite, couples massages, champagne turn-down service. Paid in part with cash. The rest? A credit card tied to their joint account. John sat in silence, staring at the open tabs on his laptop. Credit card. Cash. His birthday money. Used not just to fund her affair, but to pamper his brother. It wasn't just betrayal. It was larceny dressed in lingerie. He got up, walked to their bedroom, and opened Lydia's lingerie drawer. There, nestled among silk and lace, was a receipt from a high-end boutique. A purchase he didn't remember, in a size he hadn't touched in months. That was the moment the ache in his chest gave way to something sharper. A line had been crossed, not just of fidelity, but of dignity. Lydia hadn't just cheated. She'd stolen from him to do it. When Lydia walked through the door, sun-kissed and humming some spa playlist tune, John was already waiting, cool, composed, a storm held barely in check. She tossed her heels aside, dropped her overnight bag with a theatrical sigh, and padded into the kitchen like everything was fine. God, team building is exhausting, she said, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge. She didn't notice the phone already sitting on the counter, screen paused on the pool video. When she finally did, she froze. For one breathless second, her face crumpled, not with guilt, but calculation. It's not what you think, she started, voice already trembling with the shape of a lie. John didn't speak. He simply opened his phone again and slid it toward her, spa confirmation. Payment history, time-stamped photos, all lined up like a courtroom exhibit. Her eyes flicked over the evidence, and something inside her shifted. The mask cracked. Okay, she said, voice clipped. Fine. I took the money. It was cash, John. It's not like you noticed until now. Still, he said nothing. She scoffed, then laughed, a bitter, low sound. You know what? At least Felix makes me feel wanted. At least he knows how to touch a woman. That broke the silence. John slammed the bedroom door behind him, heart pounding like war drums. He heard her on the phone minutes later, whispering furiously, probably to Felix, warning him. It wasn't denial. It wasn't shame. It was survival. Lydia wasn't sorry. She was cornered. The next morning, John woke with a hangover that had nothing to do with alcohol. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a sick hum buzzing in his skull. Something was still wrong. More than just the affair, more than just the betrayal. Lydia's words echoed like rot. It was cash, John. You didn't even notice. That sentence became his compass. He opened their joint bank account again, scrolling backward, this time with intent. Small withdrawals marked as groceries or rideshares. But their fridge hadn't been full in weeks. And Lydia barely took Ubers anymore. He dug deeper. Then came the real punch. A quiet, buried email from a credit monitoring service he'd ignored months ago. It mentioned a new card approval, with his name added as an authorized user. But John had never applied for anything. His pulse spiked. He called in a favor from Clara, an old friend at the bank. With her help, he unearthed 3 credit cards in Lydia's name, 2 of which listed him, fraudulently, as a co-user. No physical cards had ever arrived. She'd set them up to avoid detection. The statements read like a confession. High-end restaurants, Airbnb rentals, a $300 necklace ordered 3 days before Felix's birthday. When John confronted Lydia that evening, she barely blinked. "You always wanted to control everything," she said coolly. "I needed freedom." Freedom, apparently, meant maxing out secret cards to spoil his brother in hotel beds. John didn't shout. He just reached for her favorite mug and smashed it against the wall. John began disappearing in pieces. First, it was a few shirts, then his birth certificate, the shoebox of childhood photos tucked high in their closet. Every morning, after Lydia left for work, he'd take another slice of his life and slip it into the trunk of his car. He moved quietly, methodically, like someone erasing footprints before a storm. The loft his cousin Liam had offered wasn't glamorous. Unfinished floors, no air conditioning, and a bathroom mirror hanging crooked, but it was his. And more importantly, it was far away from her. The watch she ordered arrived on a Thursday, a sleek $2,000 display of ego purchased with their joint funds. John intercepted the delivery, surprised by his own calm as he opened the box and stared at the cold gleam of it. For a moment, he considered leaving it on the table, evidence of her entitlement. But why should she have the satisfaction? He looked up the store's return policy, drove across town, and handed it back with a smile. The refund landed in their account by sundown. John moved his half to his new bank before she could even blink. The next morning, with the loft ready and papers signed, he left the house one last time. On the kitchen table, he placed the divorce documents, his wedding ring, and a note. "You were right. I don't know how to keep a woman happy. But apparently, neither does my brother." And then he locked the door behind him and didn't look back. 5 days after John vanished from the home they once shared, Felix appeared like a bad dream, leaning against a lamppost in the dim parking lot outside John's workplace, arms crossed, face gaunt. He straightened when he saw him, like a man desperate for redemption, but too proud to beg properly. "John," he called, voice cracking, loud enough that 2 co-workers turned to stare. John almost kept walking. Almost. But curiosity, or something darker, stopped him. Felix launched into a monologue, chaotic, panicked like someone trying to build a lifeboat out of confession. "She's not answering my calls," he said. "She told me she loved me, man. I thought we had something real. Now she's iced me out, just like that." He looked genuinely bewildered, as if the woman he'd betrayed his brother for was suddenly unfair. "I know you hate me," Felix muttered, stepping closer. "But you're not the only one who got hurt." John stared at him, really looked. The man standing in front of him wasn't a lover or a villain. He was a hollow echo of someone John used to know, grasping for sympathy like it was oxygen. But all John felt was silence. Cold, echoing silence. "I can't help you," he said flatly. When Felix reached to touch his arm, John yanked it back so fast Felix stumbled. Without another word, John got his car and drove away, leaving his brother in the rearview mirror, shrinking smaller and smaller, until he was nothing at all. The next wave came not from Lydia or Felix, but from Lydia's job. While John was grocery shopping, his phone vibrated with an email from her company's legal department, not HR. It was polite, professional, and razor-sharp. They were conducting an internal review and had received allegations concerning Lydia's conduct. Could John confirm whether certain claims of infidelity were true? He stood frozen in the cereal aisle, surrounded by bright boxes and sugary mascots, reading the email over and over. His heart didn't race, it sank. Lydia had beaten him to the punch, preemptively accusing him of spreading rumors, trying to spin the narrative before her company could draw its own conclusions. He forwarded the email to his lawyer immediately, within 10 minutes. She called. "We respond carefully," she said, "professionally, but we will not be silent." Together, they drafted a clean, factual reply. Yes, John had filed for divorce, citing infidelity, with supporting documentation. No, he had never communicated with anyone at Lydia's workplace. Attached were screenshots, a redacted spa receipt, and a statement of intent to remain private. An hour later, the auto reply came in. Out of office. John put his phone down, exhaled slowly, and left the cereal aisle empty-handed. Some battles he was learning required silence sharper than any scream. The divorce finalized with all the quiet weight of a door closing behind him. Lydia kept the house but had to refinance it and pay John a share of the equity. She shouldered the bulk of the legal fees, 80%, per their agreement, And John walked away with his retirement untouched, his dignity bruised but intact. When she requested 5 minutes alone, outside the courtroom, but within earshot of security, he reluctantly agreed. Her eyes were glassy, her voice softer than he remembered. "I'm not trying to win you back," she said. "I just needed you to know I'm sorry. For all of it." He nodded once. "I don't hate you," he said, and it was true. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and healing didn't mean returning. As for Felix, he had been reduced to a series of unanswered texts and voicemails, each message more desperate than the last. "I know you'll probably hate me forever," the final one read. John didn't respond. Instead, he moved into a small apartment filled with light, booked a solo trip to Costa Rica with a refunded watch money, and deleted his old social media. He wasn't chasing closure anymore. He was living it. In today's world of curated selfies and masked intentions, John's story is a stark reminder. Trust is earned daily, not assumed forever. Love isn't just passion, it's partnership, accountability, and honesty when no one's watching. In your own life, don't ignore red flags just because the memories are beautiful. Protect your finances, your mental peace, and your boundaries. Keep receipts, literally and emotionally. If someone makes you question your worth or gaslights your instincts, listen to the quiet voice inside. You're not crazy. You're catching the truth. And walking away, even shattered, is braver than staying stuck in someone else's lie.